Often when the Persian Empire is mentioned, our minds are filled with the images of the 300 Spartans holding their own against staggering odds along the narrow shores of Thermopylae, or of Alexander the Great and his sweeping defeat of Darius's army at Gaugamela. However, the third Iranian dynasty, known as the Sassanid Empire, has its fill of battles, imperial struggle and intrigue. The Sassanid Empire stretched from the eastern fringes of Turkey all the way through to the deserts of Arabia. It arose from the ashes of the fallen Parthian Empire. The Parthians struggled to hold the empire intact after suffering a string of defeats at the hands of the Roman legions. The dynasty was founded by Aradashir. He was crowned in the year 226 within his new capital Ctesiphon, after he defeated the last Parthian king Artabanus. Aradashir was the head of a prominent noble family. Taking advantage of the instability within the Parthian Empire, Aradashir successfully consolidated his hold over several Parthian vassal states. He went on to secure several important victories against his rival Artabanus, and in doing so, he established a new dynasty named after his ancestor, Sasan. A mere 6 years later, Aradashir would pit his imperial might against the world's dominant power, Rome. That struggle would define an era of sieges, battles, diplomacy, followed by years of peace. In the year 230, Aradashir made a bold move and invaded Roman territory, besieging Nisibis in modern-day Turkey and ordering penetrating raids into the heart of the Roman Empire as far as Syria and Cappadocia. It was Herodian, a Roman civil servant and historical commentator, who summarizes the damage caused in the following passage. Although the barbarians seem to have been victorious through the help of some superior numbers, they were still worn out by the many clashes in Media and the battle in Parthia, where many had died and even more had been wounded. Almost the same number of soldiers had fallen on both sides, and the surviving barbarian soldiers seemed to have won because of their number and not their force. The passage suggests that the Sassanid forces were large in number and had little trouble invading Roman territory, and with the Roman legions losing the same number of men suggests that the defeat would have been devastating, robbing the legions of experienced soldiers and weakening their border force. Aradashir secured another important victory against the Romans in 240, capturing the important trading hub of Hatra in northern Mesopotamia. After these impressive victories, Aradashir was succeeded by his son Shapur. Possibly taking advantage of the transition of power, the Romans staged an attack against the Sassanids. However, the campaign proved disastrous, resulting in the destruction of the army and the death of the Emperor Gordian. Several more wars erupted between the two great powers. In the 3rd century, between 252 and 253, Shapur launched a devastating attack against Rome's eastern provinces, laying waste to Syria and sacking Antioch. In his 3rd campaign, Shapur's forces struck deep into Syrian lands and managed to capture the Roman Emperor Valerian. The Sassanids represented a long, fitful nightmare for the Romans, a spectre of fear. Like their Parthian counterparts, the Sassanids proved to be a worthy enemy. Long periods of war were punctuated by episodes of peace. Both empires took the opportunity to shore up their defences along their ever-shifting borders. Still reeling from their defeat, the Romans built a string of fortifications along their eastern border, reinforcing their frontier forces with further units. The fortifications were meant to act as a deterrent and to exhaust and frustrate Sassanid units in times of war. In turn, the Sassanids adapted, circumventing the fortresses entirely due to Emperor Constantius' failure to deploy extra legions to the border, or by laying siege. By the 4th century, the Sassanids had developed effective siege weapons which they used with devastating effect. They successfully captured the fortress city of Amida, yet the siege took a heavy toll on both sides. The Sassanids sustained losses of 20,000 men, while the Romans experienced casualties of between 10 to 15,000. Consequently, Shapur was unable to capitalize on his Pyrrhic victory and abandoned the campaign after the capture of another important border fort at Singara. Both empires experienced mounting costs. The Sassanids relied heavily on mercenary detachments to support their conventional forces. The Romans poured extensive resources into securing their borders. Garrisons were housed in huge fortifications, surrounded by mud brick walls, and the border forces required regular shipment of grain and equipment and upkeep of all the fortifications. War was not a constant. Much of the 4th and 5th centuries were characterized by long periods of peace. Regular diplomatic exchanges led to the development of complex rituals and formalized communication. Men of high rank were chosen as ambassadors. Times of ascension saw both sides dispatching diplomats to renew treaties or modify existing ones. This exchange led to an unintended consequence, as the regular interplay influenced both Sassanid and Roman customs, with each adopting the cultural norms of the other. As the conflicts dragged on, neither side could claim a decisive victory. It is clear that the long campaigns of war, the regular border intrusions of Sassanid forces had seriously weakened an already faltering Roman Empire. By the 4th century, both sides realized that neither possessed the capability to utterly defeat the other. As a result, serious diplomatic efforts were made to stave off any further costly wars. With the splintering of the Roman Empire, further conflicts erupted between the Sassanids and the Byzantines. The Byzantine-Sassanid War lasted between 602 and 628, which proved to be the final and most devastating war between the two sides. With each empire still licking its wounds, a third power emerged, a force inspired by divine scripture. Islam was growing within Arabia. The Sassanids and the Byzantines took note. Now the stage had been set for another conflict, a conflict that will reshape the world. Thank you for listening. Until next time.